But we begin in Washington, where President Trump says he will no longer sign a major housing affordability bill into law. Let's go live to Washington and CBS News White House reporter Aaron Navarro. Aaron, good to see you today. What is the president saying about this?
Mugo, the president canceled the signing ceremony for what's known as the Road to Housing Act. This was a bipartisan bill that passed with over 80 yeses in the Senate. It was backed by Elizabeth Warren, as well as Republican Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, an ally to President Trump. And it's all because the president is instead pushing for Republicans in Congress to pass what's known as the Save America Act. That will require proof of citizenship and photo ID in order to vote. It has been a big priority for the president in recent weeks as he has delayed the nomination of a permanent director of national intelligence, as well as the reauthorization of allowing warrantless surveillance of foreign actors, known as FISA, from being passed by this Congress. It also comes, this announcement that the signing ceremony was canceled, comes before his meeting.
Hello and welcome everyone. Dr. John is here. So this has just happened. Trump canceled a bipartisan housing bill signing at the last minute, holding it hostage until the Senate passes his Save America Act election overhaul. The celebration in Statuary Hall turned into a political standoff, leaving Republican senators stunned. That was already going to be a very bad day. But here's the part that actually made Washington lose its mind. Later that afternoon, Trump walked into the closed-door Republican lunch and started screaming. He was furious about a war powers vote that the Senate had taken the previous day when 4 Republicans crossed the aisle and voted with Democrats to rebuke his handling of the Iran war.
His closed-door meeting with Republican senators during their GOP luncheon. So this is a notable point. You're seeing Senator Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, a Democrat from New York, saying on the Senate floor that Trump is, quote, running away from one of the very few accomplishments that could actually help the American people. The Road to Housing Act was meant to help lower the cost of owning a house, help streamline regulations and make it easier to build more houses, and was pushed by his White House throughout the past couple of weeks, as it could have been a good political win for him and his party in the midterms to talk about how they're addressing affordability. Instead, the president is looking to focus on the Save America Act instead.
Yeah, strange move being that, as you mentioned, affordability seems to be the top issue, the top topic these days when we talk about politics. The president is also getting a rebuke from Congress with the Senate's passage of a war powers resolution. What's been the reaction to that?
He berated individual senators by name. He got into a screaming match with Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. He ripped into Senator Dave McCormick of Pennsylvania for missing the vote. And when he finally left, Senator John Kennedy summed it up. It would be fair to say that he was very upset about the war powers vote. Yeah, that is an understatement of the year. Now, let's be honest about the headline, because Trump has not literally closed the Senate or physically locked its doors. What he has done is use every tool available to him to pressure, punish, stall, and undermine the Senate when it does not give him exactly what he wants. The housing bill hostage situation is the most recent example. Before that, he blew up a bipartisan surveillance legislation reauthorization by demanding it be tied to the Save America Act.
You've seen the president say that it is making his job in terms of negotiations with Iran more difficult, but you're also seeing the White House argue that the War Powers Resolution Act of 1973 is unconstitutional and is more symbolic than anything. But it is a notable checkpoint in the discontent that some Republicans have with this ongoing war for varying reasons. But you are seeing some senators who have been long opposed to foreign conflicts, such as Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, as well as some senators who are more moderate and are up for re-election this year, such as Susan Collins of Maine, vote in support of that War Powers Resolution Act. Again, the president will have a chance to talk to these Republican senators face to face at this GOP luncheon in just a couple hours or so, where it's expected that he will continue his push for the Save America Act, as well as his push to get Republicans to end the filibuster so that they can pass the Save America Act with just a simple majority of the votes instead of the 60-vote threshold. You've seen Senate Majority Leader John Thune be the messenger of bad news to President Trump multiple times, just telling him the votes to end the filibuster are just not there.
He made angry phone calls to individual senators, threatening them with primary challenges after war powers votes. He escalated what Politico described as a war on Senate Republicans, repeatedly demanding they scrap the filibuster to pass his election bill, even though his own party's Senate leadership keeps saying they do not have the votes. And Senator Thom Tillis said something in an interview that captured the whole dynamic perfectly. He said Trump's behavior is undermining our ability to produce the very results he wants. Come on. A Republican senator is telling the Republican president that the president's own tactics are preventing his own agenda from getting done. That is the state of the Trump-Senate relationship right now. Here is the full context you need. The Save America Act is Trump's signature voting and elections legislation.
This morning, President Trump abruptly canceling the signing of a major piece of legislation that seeks to tackle the housing affordability crisis in what marked a significant bipartisan breakthrough.
In a Truth Social post, the president writing, quote, "Today's housing news conference and signing is hereby canceled until such time as we pass the desperately needed Save America Act, which I consider to be a national emergency." A reminder, that is the sweeping election reform bill that is stalled in the Senate that would require proof of citizenship to vote and overhaul elections. NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen joining us now from the White House. Jonathan, first, let's get to the mechanics here. At a time the Republican Party was hoping to take a victory lap on combating cost of living, the crisis that's going on, paving the way for more housing inventory, can the president then just decide to let this bill pass by both chambers of Congress just sit on his desk?
Yes, absolutely, Sam. He can just let it pass. If they don't adjourn and he doesn't sign it, it becomes law without his signature. It is possible that he could veto it, but Speaker Johnson saying he thinks that the president may still sign this.
It would require photo ID at polling places for federal elections and require proof of citizenship before a person could register to vote. Democrats are uniformly opposed to it, and a handful of Republican senators have signaled opposition as well. Senate Majority Leader John Thune has been publicly and repeatedly clear that there are not enough Republican votes to pass it, especially not through the normal process that requires 60 votes to overcome a Democratic filibuster. And Trump has been equally clear that he wants the filibuster eliminated to get the bill through. He has been demanding it for months. And Thune has been equally clear that scrapping the filibuster is also not something the Republican caucus has the votes to do. So the result is a standoff. The Save America Act cannot pass as things stand.
Within the 10-day window, it's a bill that he supported. It's a bill that 85 senators supported. It's a bill that more than 300 House members supported. And it's something that they can all go campaign on, bipartisan go campaign on, as trying to address at least one piece of the affordability problem in this country.
You know, Jonathan, the president has called on Republican leadership to kill the filibuster to pass this elections bill. Do you have a sense? Is there an appetite to do that?
There's definitely some appetite within the Republican conference in the Senate to do that, but not enough votes to get it done. There have not been enough votes to get it done for the entirety of this term of the president, for the entirety of the last term of the president, for the entirety of all recent presidents. And that's not going to change. In fact, there are senators who are not seeking re-election. There are senators who the president has helped defeat in primaries who are not going to be given to changing the rules of the Senate to help him.
And Trump's response to that standoff is to blow up everything else that is in progress until someone blinks. Are you kidding me? That is the strategy. Hold popular bipartisan legislation hostage until the Senate gives him what he wants on an election bill they do not have the votes to pass. Now, before we go any further, I want to give you a piece of context that makes the housing bill situation even more politically explosive than it looks on the surface. The bill that Trump canceled the signing of and then refused to sign limits how much big institutional investors can buy up single-family homes. According to an analysis by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, in some cities, institutional investors own more than 20% of single-family rental homes. In Jacksonville, Florida, that number is over 20%. In Dallas and Phoenix, the number of investor-owned homes grew by more than 177% and 114% respectively between recent years. This is the problem the bill was trying to address. The Wall Street competition that is making it nearly impossible for ordinary families to buy homes in cities where they grew up. And Republicans who voted for it were counting on being able to campaign on it before November. They were proud of it. They were calling it a major legislative accomplishment. And Trump, hours before he was supposed to show up and sign it, posted that it was of minor importance. He called it a yawn, and then he canceled the ceremony. Republican Representative French Hill, who had led the housing bill in the House, said Trump picked the day and then chose to change the day. That is Congressman speak for, I cannot believe what just happened. Can you believe this? A president calling millions of Americans who are locked out of the housing market a yawn because he wants leverage on an election bill his own Senate cannot pass. Let's go deep on the day at the Capitol because it was one of the most chaotic and revealing single days in Trump's relationship with his own party during this entire second term. And the chaos unfolded in layers. Start with the morning. Trump posts on social media that the housing bill signing is canceled. He says the housing bill is of minor importance. He describes the Save America Act as a national emergency. Senators who had been briefed that morning that the signing was happening are blindsided. A source from Punchbowl News described Republican senators as shocked and dumbfounded when the news broke. Representative French Hill of Arkansas, who chaired the House Financial Services Committee and led the housing bill in the House, told reporters that Trump picked the day and now has chosen to change the day. That is the polite version of what he was thinking. Senate Majority Leader Thune, when asked about the cancellation, laughed, and then he said, I just heard that. I would say at this point, I don't have any observations about that. Senate Majority Leader John Thune laughing awkwardly and saying he has no observations. That is what chaos inside a caucus looks like when the leader of the party does something the caucus did not see coming. And then Trump walked into the lunch. The lunch that was supposed to be a celebration had already been poisoned by the housing bill cancellation. And Trump came in not to celebrate, but to confront. Senators present described the hour-long meeting as passionate. The confrontation centered on the war powers vote from the day before. 4 Senate Republicans, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Susan Collins of Maine, Rand Paul of Kentucky, and Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, had voted with Democrats on a bipartisan war powers resolution urging Trump to remove U.S. armed forces from hostilities with Iran or seek congressional authorization. And Trump was furious. He called them out by name. He had a screaming match with Cassidy specifically. He berated McCormick for missing the vote entirely. And through all of it, the senators who had crossed the line sat there and took it. This is wild. Senators who were elected by the people of their states, who have constitutional duties to provide oversight of executive military action, sitting in a closed room, being screamed at by the president for exercising those duties. And here is the kicker that tells you everything about the political dynamics at play. Later that same evening, the Senate held a second vote on a separate but nearly identical war powers resolution. And this time, the vote went the other way. Cassidy and Paul, who had voted yes the day before, switched their votes. Trump claimed victory. He posted on social media that he was pleased with the outcome. He thanked Thune and he wrote, "This vote puts Iran on notice." The same vote that was meaningless to him in the afternoon when he was talking to Time magazine in the Oval Office, calling it just breaking news about someone wanting him to stop the war, was the subject of celebration that same night when the result reversed. The Senate Republicans who got screamed at switched their votes within hours of being screamed at. And Trump posted a victory. That is the power dynamic in one afternoon. Confront them, berate them, they capitulate, he posts. Can you believe this? Now let's talk about the housing bill situation in more detail because the legal mechanics of what Trump did are genuinely unusual and reveal a very specific kind of leverage game. The housing bill, called the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, passed both chambers with veto-proof majorities. Veto-proof majorities. That means even if Trump vetoed the bill, Congress would have the votes to override him. So his leverage is narrow. Under the Constitution, Trump has 10 days after receiving the bill to either sign it, veto it, or do nothing, in which case it becomes law automatically. But here is the catch. The 10-day clock only starts running after the Speaker of the House officially transmits the bill to the White House. And Speaker Mike Johnson, who is a close ally of Trump, has not officially done that yet. So the clock has not started. The bill is in a kind of legislative limbo where it has passed Congress but has not been formally sent to the president. And as long as Johnson holds it, Trump can continue threatening not to sign it without the 10-day clock running out. And then a week after the cancellation, Trump posted that he would not sign the housing bill, calling it a protest. And then the bill apparently became law anyway when the 10-day period ran and Trump neither signed nor vetoed it. Millions of Americans who are being crushed by housing costs got a law they should have had weeks earlier, delayed and dragged through political hostage-taking because Trump wanted election legislation his own party cannot pass. Come on, that is governance by hostage. And people who are waiting for housing relief got caught in the middle. Now, let's talk about the war powers battle more broadly, because the vote was not the first time Senate Republicans broke with Trump on Iran. The war started, and almost immediately, Democrats began forcing war powers votes. They vowed to trigger them weekly. Multiple senators had resolutions ready to go. Most of them were blocked along party lines. But the accumulation of votes, the weekly ritual of the Senate being forced to go on the record about an unauthorized war, is part of how the chamber is exposing the Trump administration's conduct. And when the bipartisan vote finally passed with 4 Republicans crossing, it was both a rebuke and a signal. The signal is that the political cost of total loyalty to Trump on the Iran war is starting to increase as gas prices stay elevated, as the war drags on without a clear end, and as the midterms approach. And Trump's response to that signal was to go to Capitol Hill and scream, which tells you how comfortable he is with the signal he received. Let me also walk you through what happened with the FISA surveillance legislation, because it is another example of the same pattern of Trump blowing up carefully negotiated deals to extract concessions on the Save America Act. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act governs the intelligence community's ability to conduct surveillance on foreign threats, including surveillance that captures incidental communications from American citizens. FISA needs periodic reauthorization because the authority it grants is so sensitive. And in recent years, a carefully negotiated bipartisan deal to reauthorize key FISA surveillance powers was on the verge of passing after years of work. Years of negotiations between intelligence officials, civil libertarians, and members of both parties to come up with a framework that balanced national security needs against civil liberties concerns. And then Trump, wanting leverage for the Save America Act, blew it up. His allies announced a DOJ payout fund that completely derailed the immigration funding that was supposed to be attached to the FISA deal. The administration also tapped a housing official as acting director of national intelligence at a politically awkward moment that disrupted the coalition behind the legislation. Years of careful bipartisan work gone and wasted because the president decided to use it as a chip in a negotiation over election law. Senator Tillis's line about Trump undermining his ability to produce the results he wants was aimed directly at this kind of behavior. The FISA reauthorization was something Trump's own intelligence community wanted. His tactics blew it up. This is wild. And it is the same playbook he is using on the housing bill. Withhold, demand, stall until the Senate bends. And here's the thing about the Save America Act that needs to be said clearly, because the political framing around it obscures what is actually happening. The bill would require photo ID for federal elections and proof of citizenship before registration. Trump and his allies describe it as essential election security. Democrats describe it as voter suppression designed to make it harder for the people least likely to have government-issued ID, disproportionately poor people and people of color, to vote. The substantive debate about voter ID is a genuine policy argument. But here is what is not in dispute. Non-citizen voting in federal elections is already illegal. It is already a crime. And the documented incidents of it happening are extremely rare. So the bill is addressing a problem that is already legally prohibited and demonstrably rare by creating new barriers to voting that could affect millions of legal voters who lack the required documentation. And Trump has declared this a national emergency. Not the Iran war, not housing costs, not tariff refunds, voter ID, national emergency, and he is holding a bipartisan housing bill hostage to it. Yeah, that is the political priority being revealed by the leverage play. And senators in both parties who looked at that priority ranking and thought about what their constituents are actually asking them to address. Housing costs, gas prices, the cost of the Iran war are the ones who are generating friction with the White House right now. Let's break this all the way down. I need you to take away from this video. The first is about what the housing bill hostage situation reveals about how Trump uses popular legislation as leverage. The 21st Century Road to Housing Act is genuinely popular. Polling consistently shows that housing affordability is one of the top concerns for American voters. The bill had bipartisan support and veto-proof majorities. It should have been an easy win that Trump could take credit for. Instead, he canceled the signing ceremony, called the bill of minor importance, and then ultimately refused to sign it, all to pressure the Senate on an election bill that his own party's Senate leadership says cannot pass. What that tells you is that Trump values the Save America Act, and specifically the political fight over the Save America Act, more than he values actually delivering housing relief to voters. He is willing to sacrifice a genuine legislative win on an issue voters care about in order to escalate a fight over election procedures. That is a genuinely revealing set of priorities heading into a midterm election where the cost of living is the #1 issue for voters. And Senator Schumer's line captures it perfectly. Millions of Americans are being crushed by housing costs. Donald Trump called their crisis a big yawn and then refused to sign the most significant bipartisan housing bill in decades. Yeah, that is the frame Democrats are going to use in every competitive Senate race in November. Are you kidding me? What the screaming match reveals about the Trump-Senate relationship and how thin the Republican unity actually is. 4 Republican senators voted with Democrats on a bipartisan war powers resolution. That is not a lot, but it is 4. And Trump came to the Capitol and screamed at them. And then the same senators switched their votes within hours. On the one hand, that looks like the screaming worked. On the other hand, it is profoundly revealing about the nature of the loyalty at play. These senators did not change their minds about the war powers question because Trump made a persuasive legal or policy argument. They changed their votes because the president of their party screamed at them in a closed room, and they calculated that the political cost of resisting was too high in that specific moment. That is not principled governance. It is transactional compliance under direct intimidation. And the senators who switch know their constituents can see the pattern. Tillis said it directly. Trump's tactics are undermining the ability to produce results he wants. That statement is a senator telling the president publicly that the way you are behaving is counterproductive. And the fact that it came from a Republican makes it more significant than any Democratic criticism. What the war powers vote arc tells us about where Republican resistance is actually possible. The war started with almost no Republican pushback. Republicans blocked Democratic war powers resolutions repeatedly through the spring. But as the war stretched on, as gas prices rose, as the price tag became public, and as the school bombing produced casualties, including children, the political cost of unconditional loyalty to the Iran war started to shift. The 4 Republicans who voted yes on the war powers resolution were not random. Murkowski and Collins have long track records of crossing Trump on specific issues. Rand Paul has opposed every unauthorized military engagement regardless of who is president. And Cassidy had already been publicly critical of the administration's lack of transparency with Congress on the war. These are the senators for whom the political math changed. Not dramatically, not permanently, but enough to produce a bipartisan vote. And the question heading into November is whether any more Republicans reach that same calculation as the cost of the war in blood and treasure, and gas prices keeps accumulating. And let me add one more piece before we get to the final breakdown. Because the document fight at the Senate Intelligence Committee is part of the exposing his most horrific secrets framing in the headline, and it has not gotten enough attention. Senators on the Intelligence Committee, which is supposed to have access to the most sensitive classified information in the American government, have complained that the Trump administration is stonewalling them on documents related to the Iran war. Senator Mark Warner said all things will be on the table to force access, meaning he was prepared to use every procedural tool available to block Senate business until the documents were produced. Senator Tom Cotton, a Republican, said he would block nominees and funding until the administration provided the documents he was demanding. And this is the same fight that the administration has been having over classified Iran war assessments, over what intelligence supported the claim of an imminent nuclear threat that justified the war, and over what the actual cost and casualty figures are from the conflict. The Senate Intelligence Committee's job is to be read into exactly this kind of information. They have clearances. They have a legal right to this intelligence. And the administration has been limiting what they see. Every time a senator tries to use their oversight role to find out what is actually happening in Iran, the administration finds a way to delay or limit the disclosure. The school bombing, the cost figure that analysts say is understated, the war powers legal basis. All of it is information that senators are fighting to get and that the administration is fighting to control. That is the expose in the headline. Not a single bombshell document, but a pattern of the Senate demanding to know what is happening and the administration doing everything it can to keep it from finding out. Senate Democrats are using oversight speeches, classified document demands, and nominee holds to pressure Trump on Iran and the Save America Act standoff, creating a real constitutional confrontation. The housing bill is still hostage, the war powers fight is unresolved, and the midterms will determine whether these oversight tools actually produce accountability.